DeKalb does now, which is buy a pot of coffee and put it in the machine and it brews it. And actually brewing it 1 cup at a time means you get really good coffee. Whereas if you brew it and have it in an urn, it kind of goes downhill from there.
I swear by my Keurig, so it's a good thing. But I think a cafe environment is more than that, but that's probably another discussion.
It has come up time and time again, that the environment of coffee and the coffee shop, it comes up at every meeting.
So, I mean, I like when I take my dad to the DeKalb Clinic that, you know, to see the VAC volunteers at their little version of the cafe. But, a quick question and then back to the terminals. I assume that the building predates asbestos, so we don't have any of those concerns?
That's correct.
Or did some of the...
that all tested in lead paint too. And the asbestos that was in the Youth Services Department has been remediated.
Oh, super. I lost my beloved Santa Monica Library for 9 months as they took care of that. Back to the terminals idea. I know, you know, particularly in post 9/11 times, librarians stood strong with regard to potential access of lending records and the like, and certainly appreciate that, as Bill was referring to, the intellectual freedoms that libraries stand for. However, understanding the bottleneck for computer resources, do you anticipate some point in time when you have to make some type of budgeting, if you will, so that if a person is updating Facebook statuses, that might be a little bit different priority than somebody who's doing job search or online learning? Or is the library's commitment to remain neutral for all uses and blind to, I don't mean that derogatorily, but neutral to...
Libraries don't make judgments, period.
So that's a firm
unless you're
position.
looking at porn. And then I'm old enough, I walk over and say, not in a public place.
You don't have a filter for that?
We do have filters, but adults can choose. Remember, that's part of the act. But anyway, yes. But
my business development guy is making me work on my LinkedIn page. There's
yeah,
nothing I'd rather do less.
That's true.
But
no, that's true.
It is considered marketing.
Our son, who's an
days,
attorney, also has to have a LinkedIn page. You're absolutely right.
It's just Facebook.
I understand it's part of
people.
career development at this point in time, but at some point, you know, somebody looking at...
I
guess
don't make judgments if people check out Daniel's. Don't say you should be reading Cervantes. So we just don't make judgments, except, you know, budgeting. I don't, you know, right. But 1 hour basically is the only limit we do. Our computers are wiped every night, again for protection, but we don't make judgments about what people read, what people see, what they look at on the internet. We just, librarians are back to neutral. Librarians are neutral. We don't care.
In terms of partnerships and potential financial partnership, do you know, there's a lot of excellent job development and you know, I don't know where many people, job hunters, as has been talked about tonight, would be without the library resources. Are there any partnerships and potential federal money, therefore, with the whatever it's called over on East Lincoln Highway?
All of that needs to be explored because we don't know what it's going to cost you. Unless you write the check for it all and say the sky's the limit. We don't know what it would cost, but we will. First of all, the rush is to apply for the state grant. The state grant, every library in the state is ranked as to what they're eligible for, and DeKalb is eligible for 2/3 of the eligible construction costs.
No, Dee, I think I forgot to set the stage mentioning that when we started.
2/3?
One of the things that's pushed this project into high gear is the state of Illinois has set up a bond program with $50 million to aid in public library construction. And the libraries in the state have all been ranked in order of priority. And the grant will pay anything from 25 to 75% of construction costs, depending on the need of the community. In the case of DeKalb, the grant would pay 2/3 of the cost of building the library. However, all the documentation, and there's a lot, has to be put together and in the hands of the state by the middle of April.
So
And-
we're moving fast.
And will DeKalb get it? It depends on how many libraries of greater need apply. Because I'll start at the top and work down. But I'm working with a lot of libraries, and a number of the ones in the greatest need just can't decide how and when to do it. And I thought they were foolish, but they're just punting and not doing it. So a well-organized library like DeKalb, even though it's not at the top priority, may well end up with money because it has taken the effort to put everything together. But that's what's driving getting it done fast.
That's
But
an exciting headline.
It's unbelievable.
That's a
I
very
mean,
exciting
because we fully intended to buy, we could buy the land and then sit on it. I mean, we had an architect.
Well, it's
we
the
had a
construction
building
costs
material.
that are.
But we could, and then, Bill, we've already started with the board and potential capital campaign manager to start the corporate conversations, shall we say, and see what happens.
So who's spearheading this, would it be a grant application or?
It was Illinois statute passed about 3 years ago. It was immediately challenged by somebody, and I've forgotten the reasons, but it took like 2 years to sort through the courts.
It's video gaming, aren't we proud?
And
Is that-
the statute was accused of dealing with multiple topics, which is
Right.
not legal in Illinois. And the state Supreme Court said no, it is all because it's all connected to revenue to support these programs, therefore it's one topic.
And that was like July, they released the application, August, we were actually able to access it in October with administrative rules. So once it's released, I mean, we're in high gear.
So it's not released yet?
Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
released.
So do
I
you
mean,
have-
once the application was
Do you have
released.
a grant, I mean, is there a person or a committee that's assigned to this task?
By Thursday night, the end of Thursday night, we'll have a team.
At any rate, it's not a terribly complicated thing. What's bad about it is that the requirements for submissions are not as crisp as they ought to be. It reminds me of what you call bad teaching, where the teacher says,
Right.
you get your
No,
grades for
very
guessing
good
what I
language.
want. And this is, as far as I can see, what the state library does is a conformance check on the applications. Are all the requirements met? The difficulty is pinning them down on what the requirements are. And Dee's been to meetings, I've been to meetings, one of Dee's staff and I are going to a meeting Thursday, trying to pin people down on exactly what they want. I think Dee has written lots of very successful grants, and I think the grant will be great coming out of this library.
But Fred's written even more.
But
It'll be a group effort.
So there's a good team.
The architects will be involved because they've
Because
got to
it's down
submit
to
a
floor
floor plan.
plans.
But it does mean that we have to get the program finished and get a floor plan that's satisfactory. It could be tweaked later, I'm sure, but we've got to know where we're going by about the 1st of April.
Sign off
And
from the
that
Illinois
means
Historic
that-
Preservation Agency.
That everybody's hitting the ground running as fast as they can go. Because this is a very complicated project. If it were a 15,000 square foot library, wood frame on slab out in a new area of a small town,
Greenfield would be different.
it would be so easy, but there are so many complicated things here. And so Eric and his team are not going to be sort of sitting around evenings saying, what the heck do we do tonight?
Is it less expensive to go 2 floors? Have you?
Yes. You also need the 2 floors because of the limitations on the site.
And if we want to build for future expansion, it can only be up, which will increase that original cost. But it would be, we need to look at the future. I mean, we have this wonderful example ahead of us that they thought for 100 years, and we would like to be worthy of that model, right?
It's nice to think that the community 50 years from now can say, well, these guys planned well, building works well.
So I mean,
So did I hear that right, that it is, at this point, 2 stories with contemplation for the structure or possible 3rd in the future if needed? Is that what I heard or not?
Well, there's nothing yet, but that's the general thinking.
Well, that's why.
We're having these meetings and then we're gonna get our marching orders Thursday night and then we'll,
Well, I'm only
We'll start
responding
working
also,
on
I
it.
think that the extra floors, they didn't have much space in Oak Park too, but the floors work and the openness of that space
Isn't that great?
is part of it. I know space, but go 3 floors and really make it spatial, you know what I mean?
you can add on to the roof of that building.
But the space is part of what makes that,
I agree. It's beautiful.
right.
So the determination whether or not to build it in such a manner that a 3rd floor could be retrofitted has not been made yet, and you'll have 2 different cost bases, one that might allow for that expansion and the other that doesn't.
Well, we typically look at some way of expanding the library when we do the basic planning, just so that you don't build on a site and leave the library with no options in the future.
Good.
Sometimes you can work it out where horizontal expansion works, sometimes it's vertical. It looks likely that vertical in this case is, in the early going, it's just a factor on the cost of footings, basically, to hold up the upper floor.
I mean, in theory, that's what the DeKalb City Hall was built for, but then they come to find out there's lots of
You
asbestos.
really have to do it with libraries because it's 150 pounds a square foot instead of
A
40
different
pounds a square foot for office space.
Well-
It's a serious floor load.
And that's the extra cost burden that I talk about when I say, is it the most efficient place to put computer resources, which I don't believe have those requirements, but for the density of books, I would appreciate that.
The way the
You
codes
need-
are written, if it's a library, it's 150 pounds a square foot.
Exactly.
They don't give you a break.
Right.
The other thing we look at always is that libraries always move things around. And I've seen libraries that said, well, this was going to be a reading room and therefore it was going to be 80 pounds a square foot or something. And then they decided they wanted to put reference book stacks at each end and found they couldn't do it because the floor wouldn't hold the weight. I was visiting the Northwestern University Library and they're really worried about their map library, where it turns out that the balcony is strong enough for these horribly heavy map cases, but the main floor isn't. And all the librarians are sitting there saying, gee, what are we going to do if the floor of our map library collapses?
We've studied more than one library that didn't meet the structural requirements when we looked at
Well,
some
I'll tell you
columns.
another thing, record retention, you have to keep personnel records 75 years or something like that, and they have to be in fireproof cabinets or
Yeah.
some kind of storage, so I don't know if you're gonna do a record
But it-
retention room.
It's best to keep the library structured so it can handle anything. Just
Right.
40 years ago, who knew what libraries are going to be? And what we've ended up with is not just books when the book comes out, but we've ended up with a book in 6 different formats kind of
Right.
throughout the library and different equipment. You never know what the next piece of equipment's going to be. It might be heavier than
So
what we're
again,
used to.
100% of the library has to be built to this 150
Yes.
square, what's the?
You might be able to put a floor on top that you said was office only or something, but that really limits your use of the building in the future.
So, but even this front entryway, which is just gonna have meeting space and is not anticipated to house any books, will have to be built to this standard. Whereas if it was just office space, it would be a,
Because librarians like to put
Right,
Wherever
they have
the-
book sales,
I
they do
do
book
too.
sales in them, we go into them all the time, and they're loaded up with tables with books and things and carts and
Right.
so forth.
Well, and if you run out of space, a meeting room is a good place to expand into.
So there are some areas of the building that will be sized down, but the majority of the building is gonna be sized to handle libraries.
No, I've been working with libraries all my life, and they're always running into problems where they want to move something somewhere and they can't move it there because that part of the building wasn't designed to hold the weight. So in the life of a library, construction is a very small cost. Maintenance and staffing are the real costs. And so anytime we can build a building now that saves people and saves energy, we're way, way, way ahead in terms of long-term cost to the community. Because having to go back and retrofit strength to a library, or having to hire more people because we, in the process of doing it more cheaply, we made it more complicated, all get us in real trouble. The aim of the library board is to not have to hire more staff because they're making the building a lot bigger. That is very tricky. But in terms of community cost, that is, I think, the really significant community cost is library staff. 2/3 of the cost of running a public library is staffing. And by controlling, by having a building that is tremendously efficient in use of staff, there's no better way to save the community money. Although construction looms large, think of the annual operating cost, and it doesn't take.
No, I think it's something like 10–15% of the cost of owning a building for 50 years is the construction cost.
Yeah.
It's much greater when you factor in all the operating costs.
You've got to, that's why putting on exterior services that stand up well to the weather really pays, because the cost of refurbishing them is so great. We're working with a library right now down in Metro East, and it's 15 years old and it's worn out because it was built with cheap materials. And it wasn't a cheap building. It just was a little bit. It should have been a little better built. And I think if they'd spent 10% more, they'd have no trouble. But all the exterior materials are junk, and as a result, what a short-sighted thing. So I think that building a simple, straightforward building that is sturdy and well-designed and easy to watch is the single best way to save the community money.
I hate to, bring up, use of outdoor space. I mean, at one time that patio was really a lovely component of my use of the library.
Upstairs or downstairs?
Outside the front door.
Upstairs?
Upstairs, yeah.
Upstairs.
Any additional plans for outdoor space, particularly in the summer months? That was one of the things in the Renew project. People clamored for more outdoor dining, for example, and so for the nice months to have potentially.
Well, that's what we're talking about today. Is that if there's an interest in that, more of that kind of space, you have a beautiful court, entrance court, which a lot of libraries don't have, and frankly, a lot of libraries are allergic to letting people go outside with the books. They react very poorly. It tends to vary from area to area, but that's a beautiful area. We don't intend on changing that area up there. That we expect that to be part of the preservation push, is to keep that area as it is. We haven't talked about adding more space.
Do you think the library should have more exterior reading space?
Again, if it might be accomplished in a configurable manner. Obviously, there are many inclement months here where that would essentially be wasted space. But I don't know if solarium type areas facing what is the street now, but who knows what it will be as a possibility. I think that would be a popular feature to take advantage of year round.
Is the 125-person community room planned for subterranean or ground level?
We haven't located anything yet.
This part of DeKalb, that part of
Are we-
DeKalb,
Nothing's intended on being underground.
and
No.
I think I don't think the architects
Yeah, that hill
want
that
to put
slopes
anything
down there
underground
a little
because
bit now.
the likelihood of flooding is so
We hate
great.
water.
As it is, the library's basement floods right now. And that's fairly, it's only about 4 feet below, only about 4 steps below the sidewalk. If you had a meeting room underground, it would be, the floor of the meeting room might be 18 feet below the sidewalk. And the hydrostatic pressure would probably pretty horrible. And it's really, in libraries, basements aren't extremely cheap.
No.
They're cheaper than building another floor, but not a lot cheaper. In houses, basements are just almost free. But in libraries, because of the construction, they're very expensive. So I think that my anticipation is that the architects will strive to keep everything above ground for those two reasons. First, you don't save a lot by putting it underground, and second, you run a big chance of water problems around here. And having your new basement flood is no fun at all. But you can, for not much more money, you could put it on an upper floor instead. Because the only difference in real cost is that instead of having a solid concrete wall, you have an attractive wall with windows. Like I worked for one library where they had just finished building a new building with a basement that was totally windowless. And A, it flooded, and B, they had staff offices down there, and the staff were just miserable down there in these windowless pits. And they could have had an extra floor with all of that and probably increased the cost of the building, what, 3–4%?
Yeah.
Not much. because the envelope of a building isn't very much. The air conditioning costs a lot more than the envelope, and so why not take advantage of natural light, save the money that goes with using daylight, and have a place everybody loves to be. So I would think it would always be above grade. And say just adding to it is the fact that they've had so much trouble with soil water in that part of DeKalb. It sounds really scary. And I'm talking Eric's business, but I think that, and in general, nobody likes being in a totally windowless basement. And if the library is walk in from the sidewalk, which it really needs to be, the basement's going to have no light whatsoever. It's going to be just horrible.
Well, we're having soil borings done to study where the water level is.
Find out how bad it is.
Could you say a few more words about the relationship to the staff and how the building is gonna try to meet that requirement of, well, not requirement, but the hope of not increasing the staff? I mean, it sounds like quite a challenge. How's that gonna be met?
Basically, it's having big open spaces. If you don't have lots of little nooks and crannies, a small number of people can keep an eye on space a lot better. Look at the complexity of your children's department right now. Lines all over the place in the basement. Hard to watch. And imagine that now 3 times as big or 4 times as big and 3 times as windy. You're going to need more people there just to make sure what's going on in the back corners. If you can have a reference desk in an adult department and you walk into the department and there's the desk, and the people at the desk can just sort of look around and see the whole department. Computers and books and study rooms through the glass walls. You don't have to hire people to stand watch. And as long as you're hiring people because the community, citizens are coming to the library by the thousands and saying, we want you to do this, help us with this, and so on, it's great. You can tell the city government, look, we're being driven, we just can't keep up with the work. People are wanting so much help in the library. And that's a very good case to make. But if you say, well, we built a pretty complicated building and we can't watch it, that's a less strong case. What does happen is that you build a new library and use will go way up. And the question is, at what point is it simply more work than the staff can handle? And the library's looking at all kinds of ways of making this go more rapidly. Like
And right now I'm staffing 2 buildings. The children's department and the upstairs department. I have to have 2 people plus a shelver on 2 floors. Now, in the new building, we'll combine this into 1 circulation desk. So then the current staff can be doing other things.
But you raise a very good point. How do we not have the building itself dictate more staff, but instead have increased use dictate more staff? Because it's very easy to tell the citizens that...
Oh, we have to leave in 1 minute. Finish up. Last question.
Are we required to leave the school?
The contract goes till 9 o'clock because the custodians
We have to pay.
lock up.
I'm tighter than a tape.
I'm sorry.
There are many other things I